Sometimes the first thing that breaks in war isn't a body, it's a belief. West Texas, September 1944. The heat sat over the plains like a heavy blanket, pressing against the earth until the dust itself seemed to breathe. 10 miles outside Camp Brady, the little town of Red Hollow was waking before sunrise, wooden storefronts glowing pale under lantern light, pickup trucks lined along Main Street, and horses tied to rails outside the general store. It was rodeo day. By noon, the whole town would be packed shoulder to shoulder around the arena, boots digging into dry dirt, hats low against the sun, waiting for the first gate to swing open. But 6 hours earlier, while the sky was still dark blue and the air still carried a trace of night coolness, 12 German prisoners of war stood in silence behind the wire fence of Camp Brady, waiting for transport. Their work detail had been assigned at 5 a.m. No explanation. No discussion. Just names called and boots on gravel. Klaus Ritter stood at the front of the line, hands folded behind his back, shoulders straight despite the weight of captivity pressing on him for nearly 14 months. At 28, Klaus had learned that survival inside a POW camp depended on silence more than strength. Beside him stood Friedrich Bauer, older by 6 years, broad-shouldered, with the rough hands of a mechanic and the permanent frown of a man who trusted nothing. Otto Weiss, barely 21, shifted nervously beside them, glancing toward the truck rolling through the camp gates. Dust rose behind it. "Where are they taking us?" Otto asked in German, his voice low. Friedrich spat into the dirt. "To work." Klaus said nothing. He watched the truck stop, engine rattling, its headlights cutting through the dawn haze. The guard climbed down first. Corporal Dean Mercer. 24. Oklahoma-born. Quiet. Fair. He unfolded a clipboard and called their names. "Rodeo grounds," Mercer said, not looking up. Friedrich frowned. "Rodeo?" Otto whispered the English word like it meant nothing. Klaus knew the word. He had heard guards talk about it for weeks. Cowboys. Horses. Bulls. Competition. A celebration. Strange, he thought, to celebrate anything while the world was still at war. They climbed into the truck bed, wooden benches hard beneath them, and the engine pulled onto the dirt road west. The camp disappeared behind them, swallowed by dust and wire. The Texas morning opened wide. Flat land stretched for miles. Fence posts. Windmills. Dry creek beds. The kind of land that seemed endless, like it had forgotten where to stop. Otto leaned toward Klaus. "Do Americans hold festivals while men are fighting overseas?" Klaus stared at the sunrise burning orange over the horizon. "Apparently." Friedrich laughed once, dry and humorless. "That tells you everything about America." But it didn't. Not really. 30 minutes later, Red Hollow appeared ahead, small and alive, already moving. Klaus saw horses before people. Saddled. Polished. Restless. Men in denim and leather moved through the grounds carrying ropes and feed sacks. Women pinned ribbons to fences. Children ran through the dust chasing each other, their laughter cutting through the morning air. Klaus felt something unfamiliar. Confusion. This was not war. This was life. Loud, ordinary life. The truck stopped beside the rodeo arena. Tom Callahan stood waiting, boots planted firm in the dirt, hat pulled low, leather gloves tucked into his belt. 46 years old. Ranch foreman. Former soldier. Hard eyes. Hard hands. He looked at the prisoners the way a man sizes up horses, quietly, practically, without warmth. "These the workers?" Tom asked Mercer. Mercer nodded. Tom looked them over. "Get 'em unloading feed and setting rails. Gates open at noon." Friedrich muttered under his breath. "We build their entertainment now." Klaus stepped off the truck and looked toward the arena. Fresh timber. Red dirt. Steel gates. Beyond it, rows of wooden seats waiting to be filled. He could smell hay, leather, coffee, and dust. Strange how war could exist and life could still smell like this. Tom noticed Klaus looking. "Ever seen a rodeo before?" he asked. Klaus looked at him, not fully understanding at first. Then he shook his head. Tom gave the smallest grin. "Well," he said, adjusting his hat, "you're about to see something very American." Klaus turned back toward the arena, the sunrise now breaking fully over the Texas sky, gold spilling across the dirt like firelight, and for the first time since being captured, he felt it, that small, sharp feeling that maybe America was not what he had been told. By 7 o'clock, the rodeo grounds were fully awake. The sun had climbed over the flat Texas horizon, burning away the coolness of dawn and replacing it with dry heat that settled into the wood, the dirt, and the skin. Klaus Ritter carried fence rails beside Friedrich Bauer, while Otto Weiss stacked feed sacks near the holding pens. Around them, Red Hollow moved with a rhythm that felt strange to men who had spent more than a year behind barbed wire. There was no shouting. No fear. Just work. Honest, ordinary work. Men hammered loose boards back into place. Women arranged pies and coffee inside the exhibition hall. Boys no older than 12 brushed horses until their coats shined in the morning light. Klaus kept noticing the details. The way the ranch hands spoke softly to the horses. The way children ran freely between wagons without anyone stopping them. The smell of fresh biscuits drifting from the cook tent. It felt impossible that this existed while Europe was still drowning in smoke and rubble. Friedrich dropped a rail into place and wiped sweat from his forehead. "It is like a carnival," he said in German. "A very loud one." Otto glanced toward the center arena where cowboys practiced with ropes. "What exactly do they do?" Friedrich shrugged. "Probably show off." Klaus said nothing. His eyes stayed on the horses. He watched the way they shifted their weight, ears flicking, muscles tight under polished saddles. He knew horses. Not because of war. Because before the war, before uniforms and orders and surrender, his father had raised draft horses outside Munich. Klaus had spent most of his childhood in barns, learning how animals moved, how they breathed, how fear looked before it became chaos. He had not thought about that life in years. "You," Tom Callahan said, pointing at Klaus. Klaus looked up. Tom stood near the gate, sleeves rolled, gloves in hand. "Help me with the south pen." Klaus nodded and followed. The pen held 3 broncos, restless under the rising heat. They stomped and circled, dust lifting around their legs. Tom unlatched the feed barrel and handed Klaus a scoop. "Easy," Tom said. "Do not stand behind them." Klaus almost smiled at that. Tom watched him step into the pen, calm and steady, body turned sideways, movements measured. One horse, a dark brown gelding with a white stripe down its face, lifted its head sharply, nostrils wide, watching Klaus with sharp suspicion. Klaus stopped moving. Waited. Then lowered the feed slowly into the trough. The horse relaxed first. Tom noticed. "You have done this before." Klaus wiped his hands on his trousers. "Farm." Tom nodded once. "Germany?" Klaus nodded. Tom leaned on the fence, studying him differently now. "Not as a prisoner." "Not entirely." "Funny thing," Tom said. "A man works land long enough, he looks the same no matter what country he is from." Klaus looked at him, unsure how to answer. Before he could, a loud bell rang across the grounds. Main gate opening. The townspeople began pouring in. Trucks. Wagons. Families carrying blankets and picnic baskets. By 9 o'clock, the wooden stands were filling fast, hats and dresses moving like waves under the sun. Otto stood frozen near the rail, staring at the crowd. "All these people," he said quietly. "For this?" Friedrich folded his arms. "To watch men fall off horses." But Klaus kept watching something else. Near the far holding pen, one bronco was pacing harder than the others. Too hard. Its ears pinned back. Its back legs stepping unevenly in the dirt. A slight limp. Small, but there. Klaus narrowed his eyes. The animal was not wild. It was uncomfortable. Nervous. He looked toward Tom, who was busy speaking with a rider near the gate. Klaus almost said something. but stopped. What did it matter? He was a prisoner. What would an American cowboy care about the opinion of a German captive? The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeaker. The crowd erupted in cheers. Dust rose into the hot Texas air. The first gate was about to open. The gate snapped open and the first bronco exploded into the arena like a storm breaking loose across open land. Dust jumped into the sunlight. Hooves pounded hard against packed earth. The rider held tight, one hand in the air, his hat nearly flying off as the horse twisted and kicked beneath him. The crowd rose as one, boots stomping on wooden boards, voices rolling together into one long thunder of excitement. Otto gripped the fence rail so hard his knuckles turned white. "Good Lord," he whispered. Friedrich shook his head in disbelief. "They pay to watch this." Klaus did not answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the horse. Not the rider. The horse. Every movement told a story. Fear. Pressure. Resistance. 8 seconds passed, and the bell rang. The rider jumped free, landed in the dirt, and tipped his hat to the crowd as if nothing unusual had happened. The stands erupted into applause. Otto stared in amazement. He could have been crushed. Friedrich laughed once. "And they cheer." Klaus watched the horse being led out by handlers. Its chest heaved, sides rising and falling fast. Its ears flicked back and forth, restless. Klaus understood now. This was not cruelty. Not exactly. It was ritual. Risk measured against skill. Man against nature, but not to conquer it. To understand it. Another gate opened. A calf roping event. Followed his eyes. "What about him?" Klaus chose his English carefully. "He is hurt." Tom looked back at the bronco, squinting into the dust. "Looks fine to me." Klaus shook his head. "Back leg. He is favoring it." Tom studied the horse again, longer this time. Before he could answer, one of the riders climbed onto the chute, tightening his glove, preparing to mount. Tom waved him down. "Hold up." The rider frowned. "What for?" Tom stepped toward the pen and watched the horse walk 3 circles. There it was. A hitch in the stride. Barely visible. But there. Tom exhaled slowly. "Well, I will be damned." He climbed into the pen carefully, and checked the leg himself. The horse flinched when pressure touched the lower joint. Not serious. But enough. Enough to make the ride dangerous for both horse and rider. Tom stepped back out, removed his hat, and looked at Klaus differently now. Not with suspicion. Not with pity. With respect. Quiet respect. "How did you see that?" Klaus looked back toward the arena, where the crowd waited without knowing what had almost happened. "My father raised horses," he said. Tom nodded once. "Looks like your father taught you right." The horse was pulled from the lineup. Another brought in. The rodeo moved on. But something had shifted. Tom handed Klaus a tin cup of water without a word. A small thing. Ordinary. But Klaus understood what it meant. For the first time since arriving in America, someone had looked at him and seen more than a uniform. By noon the sun stood high over Red Hollow, turning the arena into a bowl of heat and light. Dust hung in the air like smoke, glowing gold where the sunlight caught it. The wooden stands were full now, every bench crowded with ranchers, shopkeepers, wives in summer dresses, children swinging their boots against the boards. The smell of roasted corn, leather, coffee, and sun-baked dirt mixed together into something unmistakably American. Klaus Ritter stood near the south rail with Friedrich and Otto, no longer working, just watching. For the first time in months, perhaps years, there was no command being shouted at him. No march. No orders. Only noise. Human noise. Laughter. Cheers. Music from a brass speaker crackling near the announcer's booth. Otto shook his head, still amazed. "They celebrate everything." Friedrich folded his arms. "That is because they have something left to celebrate." Klaus understood what he meant. In Germany, celebrations had disappeared long ago, replaced by ration lines, telegrams, and silence at dinner tables. Here, even in wartime, families still gathered under open sky to watch men ride horses and test themselves against animals stronger than they were. It felt impossible. Tom Callahan walked back over carrying 3 paper-wrapped sandwiches and handed them through the rail without ceremony. Ham and cheese. Fresh bread. Friedrich stared at it like it might be a trick. For us? Tom nodded. You worked all morning. Otto looked at Klaus before taking his. Friedrich hesitated longer, then accepted it. Tom leaned against the rail beside them, facing the arena. No speeches. No awkwardness. Just 4 men watching the next rider prepare. Klaus unwrapped the sandwich slowly. Soft bread. Real meat. Mustard. The first bite stopped him for a second. Not because it was extraordinary. Because it was normal. A normal meal on a normal day. That was what felt extraordinary now. Friedrich chewed and stared ahead. It tastes like before. Klaus knew exactly what he meant. Before war. Before uniforms. Before barbed wire. The announcer called the next event. Bull riding. The gates shook as the animal inside pushed against the steel. Otto leaned forward. That one sounds angry. Tom smiled faintly. Not angry. Just ready. The rider settled himself. The crowd grew quiet, the kind of silence that exists only before something important. Klaus watched the bull through the gaps in the gate. Powerful shoulders. Sharp breath. Heavy muscles rolling under dark hide. But something else caught his eye. The latch. Loose. Barely holding. Old wood around the hinge split from too much strain. Klaus stared at it. Once. Twice. The bull slammed again. The latch jumped. Tom, Klaus said. Tom did not hear him over the noise. Klaus stepped closer. Tom! Louder this time. Tom turned. Klaus pointed. The gate. Tom looked. The bull hit it again. Hard. The wood shifted half an inch. Tom's face changed instantly. He moved fast toward the pen, signaling 2 handlers. They stopped the rider before the release. The crowd groaned, confused by the delay. Tom grabbed the latch, tested it, and the whole hinge pulled loose in his hand. One more hit, and it would have broken wide into the side lane where families stood packed shoulder to shoulder waiting for lemonade and shade. Tom looked back at Klaus across the dust and noise, understanding hitting him all at once. Twice now. Twice the German prisoner had seen what no one else had. Earl Whitaker, the deputy marshal, stepped over. What happened? Tom held up the broken hinge. Bad wood. Earl glanced toward Klaus. He spotted it? Tom nodded. Earl looked at Klaus for a long second, then tipped his hat slightly. A small gesture. But a real one. Klaus stood still, sandwich still in hand, dust on his boots, sun on his face, and felt something unfamiliar settle inside him. Not freedom. Not yet. Something smaller. Something quieter. Recognition. The repair took less than 15 minutes. Fresh boards. New iron bolts. Stronger than before. By the time the gate was reset, the crowd had settled back into its rhythm, though the delay had left a strange ripple through the afternoon. People talked about it in low voices, pointing toward the pens, toward Tom Callahan, and once or twice toward the line of German prisoners near the south rail. Word traveled fast in a small Texas town. Klaus Ritter had noticed that already. Tom returned from the repair carrying a metal coffee pot and 4 tin cups. He poured without asking. Black coffee, hot even in the heat. He handed one to Klaus first. Not by accident. Friedrich noticed. Otto noticed too. Tom leaned against the rail beside them again, hat low against the sun. You saved me trouble today, Tom said. Klaus held the cup carefully. Just saw things. Tom shook his head. Most men look. Not many see. The words stayed with Klaus. Across the arena, the next event started. Team roping. 2 riders moving together like one machine, dust rising behind them in clean straight lines. The crowd loved precision, loved timing, loved skill. Klaus understood that now. It was not chaos. It was discipline hidden inside movement. Friedrich sipped his coffee and looked out over the crowd. They trust each other, he said. Tom glanced over. Who? Friedrich nodded toward the riders. The horses. The riders. Even the crowd. Everybody trusts the system. Tom smiled faintly. That is how ranch life works. Friedrich looked down into his cup. War does not work that way. Tom did not answer right away. His face shifted, older somehow. Tired. No, he said finally. It does not. For a moment, all four men watched in silence. Dust. Sunlight. Hooves. Rope. The rhythm of ordinary life. Then Otto pointed toward the far side of the grounds where children gathered around a small livestock pen. Goats. Sheep. Calves waiting for the youth competition. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, held onto the fence rail, staring wide-eyed at everything. Red ribbons in her hair. Boots too big for her feet. Klaus saw her laughing with her father, who adjusted her hat and pointed toward the arena like he was teaching her something important. He thought of his younger sister, Elise, back home in Bavaria. She had been 10 when he left. He wondered if she was still alive. He had not heard from home in 11 months. The thought settled heavy in his chest. Tom noticed Klaus staring. Family? Klaus nodded once. Sister. Tom looked toward the little girl too. I have a son in France. Klaus turned to him. Tom's eyes stayed on the arena. 19. Infantry. Klaus said nothing. What could he say? Somewhere across the ocean, Tom's son might be facing German soldiers. Men like Klaus once was. The line between enemy and father felt thin suddenly. Earl Whitaker walked over carrying a folded paper and stopped beside Tom. County inspector wants to check the livestock pens before the finals. Tom frowned. Now? Earl nodded. State rules. Tom sighed and pushed off the rail. Come on. He looked at Klaus. You know horses. Come with me. Friedrich looked surprised. So did Otto. A prisoner invited into the center of operations. Not as labor. As help. Klaus hesitated only a second before following. They crossed behind the arena, moving through the holding lanes where the animals waited in shade and dust. Up close, the sounds were different. Heavy breathing. Leather creaking. Hooves scraping wood. Quiet tension before performance. Klaus felt at home here in a way he had forgotten was possible. Then he saw it. In the far pen. A young gray horse trembling. Head low. Eyes wide. Not injured. Terrified. And the latch on that pen was barely closed. Klaus stopped walking. The gray horse in the far pen was young, no older than 3 by the look of him, lean and narrow through the chest, still growing into his frame. His coat was silver under the afternoon light, darkened with sweat along the neck and shoulders. He kept shifting his weight from one front hoof to the other, ears twitching, eyes wide and fixed on everything at once. Fear. Pure fear. Tom Callahan followed Klaus's gaze. That one is for the youth barrel race. Klaus stepped closer to the rail. The pen latch hung loose, not broken, just not fully set. One hard push and it would swing open. Beyond the pen, less than 20 feet away, children moved between food stands and livestock ribbons, laughing, carrying lemonade and paper bags of peanuts. Klaus looked back at the horse. He is too nervous. Tom frowned. New horse. First competition. Klaus shook his head. Not nervous. Frightened. Earl Whitaker bent down to check the latch. It is holding. Klaus watched the horse's breathing. Too fast. Short bursts. Neck high. Muscles tight. He had seen it before on his father's farm when storms rolled over the hills and the animals felt danger before humans could smell rain. Fear moved through animals like weather. Quiet. Fast. Certain. Tom stepped closer to the pen, hands on the rail. "What do you think?" Klaus looked at him. The question itself felt strange. Hours ago Tom would never have asked. Klaus studied the horse again. Too much noise. Too much crowd. He should be walked. Let him breathe. Earl crossed his arms. "Competition starts in 20 minutes. Klaus said nothing. The horse slammed its shoulder lightly against the wood, then backed away, snorting. Not anger. Panic building. Tom looked at Earl. "Get the owner." Earl nodded and walked off. Tom stayed beside Klaus. "You really grew up around horses?" Klaus nodded. "Since I was 5. Tom adjusted his hat. "Funny thing. I spent half this day thinking you were here to stack feed and fix fences." Klaus looked at the trembling horse. "And now?" Tom gave a quiet smile. "Now I am thinking I should have asked your opinion sooner." The owner arrived a minute later, a thin rancher named Walter Briggs, hat sweat-stained, boots dusty, worry already written across his face. Tom explained fast. Walter looked offended at first, especially when his eyes landed on Klaus. "A prisoner says my horse is nervous?" Tom did not raise his voice. "That prisoner spotted a bad leg and a broken gait before anybody else." Walter looked back at the horse. The animal stomped hard and jerked backward against the rail. Walter's face softened. He knew. "What do you suggest?" he asked Klaus. Klaus stepped to the gate, slow enough not to startle the horse. "Take him out. Walk him away from the noise. 10 minutes. Quiet." Walter hesitated, then opened the pen. The gray horse jumped once, then froze, breathing hard. Klaus reached his hand out, palm down, letting the horse smell him first. No sudden movement. No force. Just patience. The horse lowered its head an inch. Enough. Walter took the lead rope and began walking him toward the far pasture behind the grandstands, away from the speakers and the cheering crowd. Tom watched it happen, arms crossed, saying nothing. Earl came back beside him. "You trust him now?" Tom kept his eyes on Klaus. "I trust what he sees." Behind them, the rodeo announcer called the next event and the crowd roared again. Life moved forward. Fast. Loud. Bright. But in that small patch of shade behind the arena, something quieter had happened. A rancher had listened to a prisoner. A deputy had stepped aside. And for the third time that day, Klaus Ritter had prevented trouble without asking for credit. Then Otto came running from the main rail, breathless, face pale with urgency. "Klaus," he said in German, "there is a child inside the livestock lane. The little girl with the red ribbons. She cannot find her father." Klaus turned toward the arena, and in the distance, just beyond the side gate, he saw her standing alone in the dust while the next set of horses was being moved into position. Otto was breathing hard when he reached Klaus, dust on his boots and sweat running down the side of his face. Klaus followed his pointing hand toward the side livestock lane. There she was. The little girl with the red ribbons. Standing alone beside the wooden rail, her small boots planted in the dirt, looking around with growing panic. The crowd had thickened near the concession stands, and whatever hand had been holding hers was gone now. Klaus looked beyond her. 50 feet away, 2 barrel race horses were being walked toward the warm-up lane. Fast horses. Nervous horses. Too much noise. Too many people. Too little room. Tom Callahan saw it at the same moment. "Damn!" he muttered, already moving. But Klaus was closer. He stepped through the side opening before Tom could speak, boots hitting the dirt hard, moving quickly but not running. Running would scare the child. Running would draw the horse's attention. The girl stood frozen, clutching the rail, eyes wet now, searching the sea of legs and dust for her father. Klaus dropped to one knee a few feet away, lowering himself to her level. "Hey," he said softly in careful English. "It is all right." She stared at him, frightened for a different reason now. A stranger. A man in prison clothes. Klaus kept his hands open, empty, low where she could see them. "What is your name?" The girl swallowed hard. "Emily." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Klaus nodded. Emily. We find your father. Behind him, the horses moved closer, led by teenagers focused on the arena ahead, not the child standing near the lane opening. One horse tossed its head, restless at the crowd noise. Klaus glanced once. Distance shrinking. Time narrowing. Tom and Earl were pushing through the crowd from the far side, but too far away. Klaus stood and held out his hand. Emily hesitated. Then took it. Her hand was tiny. Shaking. Klaus guided her slowly toward the fence opening, keeping his body between her and the horses. The first horse passed within 10 feet, snorting, leather creaking, hooves striking dry. Earth in sharp, heavy beats. Emily flinched and tightened her grip. Klaus steadied her without a word. Calm. Slow. Like guiding a frightened horse through a storm. Tom reached them at the rail just as Klaus lifted Emily through the opening to safety. Tom took her carefully and looked over the crowd. Whose girl is this? A man burst through the line of spectators at that exact moment, face pale, hat gone, breathing hard. Emily! He shouted. The girl twisted toward him instantly. Daddy! The man scooped her up and held her tight, relief pouring out of him like water after drought. He looked at Tom, then at Klaus, confused by what he was seeing. Tom pointed at Klaus. He found her. The father looked at Klaus, eyes full of gratitude and disbelief. Thank you, he said, voice rough. Klaus nodded once, uncomfortable with the attention. Earl Whitaker stood beside Tom, hands on his belt, watching the moment settle over everyone around them. People had seen it. The nearby crowd had gone quiet. Not because of danger. Because they were trying to understand it. A German prisoner. Helping an American child. Protecting her. Returning her safely. It did not fit the story many of them had carried in their heads. Friedrich and Otto watched from the rail, silent. Tom placed a hand on Klaus's shoulder, firm and steady. Not as a guard. Not as a foreman. As one man acknowledging another. You keep doing that, Tom said quietly. Klaus frowned. Doing what? Tom looked toward the father carrying Emily back to the stands. Reminding people that war does not tell the whole truth about a man. Klaus looked back at the arena where the next race was beginning, the crowd rising again, the announcer's voice rolling over the loudspeaker, life continuing as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. In the middle of dust, noise, and heat, the line between prisoner and neighbor had grown thinner again. And Klaus could feel it. The afternoon sun had begun to lean west, softer now but still hot enough to pull sweat through shirts and hats. The rodeo moved into its final events, and Red Hollow felt louder than ever. The grandstands shook under stomping boots. Children waved paper flags. Brass music crackled through the loudspeaker between announcements. Dust floated through the light like gold powder. But for Klaus Ritter, the noise felt different now. Less foreign. Less sharp. He stood beside the south rail again, watching the barrel racers cut tight circles around wooden barrels, horses moving like water over dirt, rider and animal turning as one. Otto leaned against the fence beside him, still staring in amazement. They race for seconds, Otto said. Klaus nodded. Seconds matter. Friedrich looked toward the crowd where Emily sat safely between her parents now, red ribbons bright under the sun. Her father had not stopped glancing toward Klaus. Not with suspicion. With something else. Respect, maybe? Gratitude. Friedrich noticed too. You changed his story, he said quietly. Klaus frowned. What story? Friedrich looked out at the arena. The story he told himself about us. Klaus understood. In war, stories became stronger than truth. Enemy. Captor. Prisoner. Those words made men simple. But people were never simple. Tom Callahan walked over carrying a folded towel and tossed it to Klaus. You look like you worked harder than the riders today. Klaus caught it, surprised. Tom leaned on the rail, watching the next race. Earl told me something, Tom said. Camp Command wants the trucks back by sunset. Otto sighed. Back to the wire? Tom nodded. That is how it goes. Klaus wiped the dust from his hands and watched the riders circle. Thank you for bringing us. Tom looked at him. I did not bring you for kindness. Klaus glanced over. Tom smiled faintly. Needed fence rails fixed. Otto laughed for the first time all day. Real laughter. Even Friedrich smiled. Tom looked at Klaus again, serious now. But I am glad you came. Earl Whitaker approached from behind, hat pushed back, holding a blue ribbon in one hand. It belonged to the youth barrel race winner, but Earl was not looking at the arena. He handed the ribbon to Tom. Emily's father wanted you to have this, Earl said, nodding toward Klaus. Klaus stared at it. Blue cloth. First place. Clean and bright against the dust. Why? Klaus asked. Earl adjusted his belt. He said his daughter was safe because of you. Said it matters more than winning? Klaus looked at the ribbon and did not take it at first. Awards were strange things. Symbols for moments. But this one felt heavier than cloth. Tom took it and folded it into Klaus's hand. Take it, Tom said. Some things are worth keeping. The announcer called for the final event of the day. Open riding. The loudest event. The crowd rose again, voices filling the sky. Klaus looked out at all of it. The hats. The horses. The dust. The sunlight hitting wood rails and old leather saddles. This morning he had arrived expecting mockery, noise, maybe humiliation. Instead he had seen discipline. Community. Risk shared openly. Families gathered not to forget hardship, but to stand together inside it. America was not what he had imagined. Not because it was perfect. Because it was human. Tom pointed toward the arena where the final rider was preparing. Watch this one, he said. Best rider in the county. Klaus nodded and leaned against the rail beside him. Not behind him. Beside him. The small difference mattered. Around them, the town roared for the final ride, and for a brief moment, under the wide Texas sky, there was no prisoner and no captor. Only men watching courage take shape in dust and sunlight. And Klaus realized something he had not expected. Sometimes freedom was not a gate opening. Sometimes it was being seen clearly by another human being. The final ride ended under a sky turning amber at the edges, the Texas sun dropping low enough to stretch long shadows across the arena floor. The crowd rose to its feet one last time, hats lifted, boots stomping against the wood, applause rolling like distant thunder across the open plains. Dust hung in the evening light, glowing gold before settling back into the earth. Klaus Ritter stood at the rail beside Tom Callahan, watching the riders circle once around the arena, tipping his hat to the crowd before disappearing through the west gate. For a moment, nobody moved. It was the kind of pause that comes after something complete. Not because it was perfect, but because it had ended honestly. Then the noise returned. Families gathering blankets. Children chasing each other through the dirt. Ranch hands leading horses back to the pens. The smell of coffee and grilled corn still hanging in the cooling air. Life returning to itself. Earl Whitaker checked his pocket watch. Truck leaves in 20 minutes. Otto exhaled heavily. Back to camp? Friedrich folded his arms and looked at the emptying stands. At least now we know Americans spend their Sundays risking broken bones for applause. Tom laughed quietly. Not every Sunday. Klaus looked down at the blue ribbons still folded in his hand. The cloth felt strange against his fingers. Soft. Light. But it carried the weight of the whole day. Tom noticed him staring at it. Keep it hidden at camp, he said. Some men might not understand. Klaus nodded. He understood that too. Not every man was ready to let war become complicated. They began walking back toward the truck as the arena emptied behind them. The same road. The same dust. But everything felt altered now. Near the main gate, a small voice called out. Mr. Klaus turned. Emily ran toward him, red ribbons still bright in her hair, her father walking behind her slower this time, hat in hand. She stopped in front of Klaus and held out something small. A paper bag. Klaus looked confused. Emily smiled shyly. Mama made extra cookies. Her father stepped beside her, clearing his throat. It is not much, he said. But thank you for bringing my little girl back to me. Klaus took the bag carefully. Warm sugar. Cinnamon. Homemade. The smell alone hit him like memory. His mother's kitchen. Winter mornings. Before everything. He nodded once, unable to find the English words fast enough. Emily waved, then ran back toward her family. Tom watched the whole thing without speaking. Friedrich leaned toward Klaus. That would never happen at home now. Klaus looked at the paper bag in his hand. No, he said quietly. Not now. They climbed into the truck as the sun touched the horizon, turning the whole sky orange and red. The arena behind them grew smaller with every mile, the sound of the rodeo fading into the distance until only the engine and the wind remained. Otto sat with his elbows on his knees, staring out at the ranch land rolling past. Do you think they will remember us? He asked. Friedrich looked out at the fading light. Maybe. Klaus held the ribbon in one hand and the paper bag in the other. He thought of Tom. Of Earl. Of Emily. Of the horses. Of the crowd cheering under open sky while the world elsewhere was still tearing itself apart. He thought about how wrong he had been about America. Not because it was kind all the time, but because kindness existed there at all, even in war. As Camp Brady came back into view, the barbed wire catching the last light of day, Klaus looked at it differently than he had that morning. The fence was still there. The guards were still there. Nothing visible had changed. But inside him, something had shifted. He had come expecting spectacle. He had found something quieter. Proof that dignity could survive even among enemies. Proof that decency could cross uniforms, languages, and borders. And as the truck rolled through the gates and the sun disappeared behind the Texas plains, Klaus understood the truth war had hidden from him for too long. The quiet moments changed people more than the loud ones ever could. He did not raise his voice that day. He raised the standard.